Carlos Fernández de Cossío is Cuba's deputy foreign minister and its top diplomat for U.S. affairs. And he says Havana is even now exchanging messages with Washington and is ready for meaningful dialogue. Carlos Fernández de Cossío, welcome to the program. So it appears that you are confirming what we heard from President Trump when he said that his administration is talking to the highest people in your government. He also says that he expects a deal. To be clear, is your government currently working or currently looking at a proposal or demand, actually, from the United States?
The U.S. government knows that Cuba is ready and has been ready for a long time to have a meaningful dialogue with the U.S. government to deal with our bilateral issues. At the moment, we've had some exchanges of messages, but we cannot say we have set a bilateral dialogue at this moment.
Are these communications, to quote the president, at the highest level?
Most things in Cuba dealing with the United States are linked to the highest level. It's a large issue for us, so there's no decision, no action taken that doesn't involve the high level of government in Cuba.
So here you are saying that Cuba is open to meaningful dialogue. It seems like a complete 180 from what your president was saying just last week, noting that measures taken by Washington are, quote, criminal and genocidal in nature. Now you're ready to talk. What has changed? Is the pressure from the United States working?
The statement from our president, it was on January the 9th, I believe. He was calling the actions taken by the United States as they are. And he also said very clearly that Cuba is ready to have a serious and responsible dialogue with the United States that is respectful of international law and, of course, respectful of our national prerogatives and sovereign prerogatives. There's no change in what he said.
The president of the United States, as well as the secretary here, Marco Rubio, have said that their goal, Marco Rubio has said this explicitly, would be regime change at some point. How do you respond to that demand?
Well, the first thing to remember is that on the measure announced on January 29th, they claim that Cuba is an emergency to the U.S. because we pose a threat to the United States. Cuba poses no threat to the United States. It is not aggressive against the United States. It's not hostile. It doesn't harbor terrorism, nor sponsors terrorism. There are no foreign military bases in Cuba, contrary to what is alleged, with the exception of the one existing in Guantanamo, the U.S. base. Cuba has no traffic in drugs or illegal drugs that would harm the United States, nor there's organizing crime in Cuba, nor organized crime uses Cuba as a platform against the United States. So the allegations that they used are not truthful. Now, the Secretary of State has said that he wants regime change. And it's been his policy and the policy of many anti-Cuban politicians in the United States for a long time. I don't know what the reasoning today of the government is when they speak of talking with Cuba, because of course our plan and our idea and our objectives would never be to change the government that we have in Cuba, the system or economic or political system that we have in Cuba.
So what are you going to do to stop the United States if that is their ultimate goal?
They are attempting to choke Cuba economically as they have been trying to do for the past over 6 decades, I would say. At this moment, they are threatening countries with tariffs to harm them if they, in use of their national prerogatives, they export fuel to Cuba. That will pose a great harm to Cuba. It is the aim to cause as much harm as possible to the people of Cuba. We have to some extent, take a look at our plans, how we use a great quote of austerity, stoicism, sacrifice, and try to overcome reality with the possibility of having a lot of limitations, I would say, in the possibility of importing fuel.
Well, blackouts are a daily occurrence across the country as we speak. How much oil does Cuba have stockpiled at this point? Is the Financial Times reporting correct that you are just 15 to 20 days away from a complete blackout? And why would you not try to, at least for the safety and for humanitarian reasons of your own citizens, try to at least compromise with the United States in their demands?
It depends on their demands. I cannot claim, I will not share what reserves in oil as. It's not something that we use publicly. I don't know which are the sources of the Financial Times. But depending on the claims of the United States, if the U.S. wants cooperation in fighting the trafficking in drugs, Cuba can help. If the U.S., and we've been helping in the past, if the U.S. wants cooperation as a neighboring country, in issues that are of interest to the majority of Americans.
You said Cuba's not trafficking drugs, so how would you help the United States?
Well, we've been helping in the past and we can continue to help with traffic that goes within the region, and a lot of the contribution and the cooperation that Cuba has provided has helped the security of the southeastern border of the United States from drug going from South America to North America, and attempts to use Cuba's waters or Cuba's air.
What is the red line that Cuba will not cross to get more oil flowing into the country?
I think it would be similar to the ones that the U.S. has. We're not ready to discuss our constitutional system, as we suppose the U.S. is not ready to discuss their constitutional system, their political system, their economic reality. And as a sovereign nation, we have the same beliefs as the U.S. But there are many other issues that we can discuss that can be useful for both countries and that could help even the countries in the region in several areas. The ones I raised, but also in science, also in health, also in education. But also Cuba is in a process of economic transformation that has had many difficulties precisely because of the pressures and the economic warfare coming from the United States. I am sure that if we sit down and if the U.S. were ready to ease the very illegitimate pressure it puts on Cuba, we could evolve in a way so that Americans could travel to Cuba, which today is prohibited by their government, could do business in Cuba, which today is prohibited by their government, could visit Cuba, could do tourism in Cuba, which today is prohibited by their government.
You mentioned and describe as illegitimate the U.S. rationale for the blockade. The Trump administration's January 29th executive order specifically cites Cuba hosting hostile countries, that's being Russia and China, as the reason for this new blockade. You have said that there are no hostile actors in the country, so I'm asking you to confirm again, to be precise. Are there any Russian intelligence operators or operations, or the same with Chinese security operations inside of Cuba right now?
There are no foreign operations in Cuba, and there's no action or activity in Cuba from any foreign country that is hostile against the United States or that can harm the United States.
So no foreign surveillance facilities?
What we host in Cuba are embassies of these countries, as the U.S. hosts embassies of those countries. The U.S. hosts business from those countries. We host business from those countries.
All right. Well, if no deal is reached in the next 30 days, let's say, depending on how much oil you have on reserve, and blackouts intensify, are you willing to be held accountable to your own citizens as to why their country has turned into a failed state?
But the reason our country would eventually, or hypothetically, become a failed state is not by the doing of our government, is a precise and defined aim of the U.S. government of trying to destroy the livelihood of Cubans. If any country were to try to destroy, or a set of countries, the livelihood of Americans, would the responsibility be of the U.S. government? Or the responsibility would be of those that want to be hostile to the U.S. and want to harm the people of the United States?
Before January 3rd, and that is the day of the operation where the United States seized Maduro from Venezuela, the Cuban economy was in its worst state since the early 1990s. You have suffering from massive stagflation. Real world inflation is estimated to be about 70% by the end of this year. You've had chronic blackouts for many, many years. So how is this all the fault of the United States policies and none of yours?
If you look at U.S. legislation, if you look at what politicians in the United States say, you'd be sure that would happen. Politicians in the United States have been betting since the 1960s that their coercive economic measures against Cuba will make the country collapse. Many politicians, officials from the State Department, officials in the White House have said that for years. It's a miracle, I would say, for them that Cuba has lasted so long. It has been the aim of the United States, by their own doing, in believing that their actions can make Cuba collapse. So blaming the Cuban government for something that the U.S., with its powerful capacity and influence around the world, blaming the Cuban government for the actions that they do is quite responsible. Try to measure any country that would support and be able to sustain what Cuba has done. Many countries around the world were on the brink of crisis just because the U.S. government said that it would raise or put in some tariffs. What Cuba suffers is equivalent to war in terms of economic coercive measures. And of course, that is a full responsibility of the United States.